There are 22 veterans a day on average that commit suicide. There's all sorts of life stressors that come on all of us. And unless you have somebody to talk to about it, you're going to just internalize all of it. Talk to somebody who has a different perspective, who's maybe been through what you have, or maybe they haven't been through what you have, because they're going to have a different perspective on life and a different perspective on where they can grow. Interview your partners. Make sure you guys have the same long-term vision on where you want to go with things.
Hey everyone, welcome to Flow Over Fear. So glad you're here today. I have a great guest with me today, another fellow GoBro with me. His name is Adam La Barr, and he is a Christian, a dad to 3 amazing kids, a coach, a real estate investor, and a business owner. And he's also a veteran of the U.S. Air Force who started his business while he was still in the military and ultimately retired to better serve his family. He is the founder and CEO of RAL Capital Group, and the host of the BizDad Podcast, which I had the pleasure of being on recently, and it was a really, really, really great time. And furthermore, he's also the co-owner of Active Duty Passive Income, where he helps coach and mentor other military members, veterans, and their families on how to invest in real estate. What a great cause that is. And thanks for being here, Adam. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with me.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we were just talking off the air, and I know, important things first, but your beard game is strong, and I think I'm
Well,
trying to get to that level. So no, great. But I'd love to hear a little bit about your origin story. You know, where you came from. I know you're formerly in the military.
Mm-hmm.
What got you into that? How'd you grow up, and what led you into that field?
So it was an early morning in the mid 1980s. Adam La Barr was born, and
Making me feel old, man.
Yeah, let's start it. Yeah, so no, it was. I was a military brat. I bounced around a little bit. My dad broke his back while in the Air Force, and got sent packing after that. Bounced around to a bunch of different jobs in upstate New York, and I graduated high school in Central New York. I didn't know any different. I joined the military right out of high school. I was 16 years old. We went to the DMV and got my permit, and then went to the recruiter and signed up for the Air Force. Like, I did not really know any different. This is what both my parents did, so this is what I was going to do. There was never a thought of college. There was never a thought of business. There was never. I had no idea anything else, so I just did that.
You were 16 when you did that?
When I signed up, yes. I didn't leave until I graduated high school. But yeah, when I first signed up. So you could sit in what's called delayed enlistment. So you're in the delayed enlistment program, just hanging out. That's how they keep you signed up. Like, every month you have a meeting, and you go and play pool, or you go meet somewhere, and they're just like, hey, keep enticing you to stick around and stay signed up. But so I did that for a while before I went into the Air Force after graduating. I'll try to speed the story up a little bit because the origin story is long, but I was enlisted paycheck to paycheck for a long time. I had no idea. Again, all I had ever seen was paycheck to paycheck. That's what my parents did. That's what all of my enlisted friends did. I didn't know that there was such thing as savings. I got out of the military, went to college. I hated that experience with a passion, but I got married while I was in college, which was great. My wife had this magical thing called a savings account that I had never heard of before. And that's where I really started to learn about saving and investing, and starting businesses, and all of that is kind of that was like the impetus of it all. But yeah, fast forward again, I decided, my wife said, you should look into real estate and do all of that, and I said, you're hilarious, I'm going to go lose money in the stock market. So I lost money in the stock market, and then said, honey, please tell me more about this real estate thing. So before you know it, I went back active duty. I was supposed to be a pilot, and I lost that. I busted my neck and lost my pilot spot. But I am thankful for that in the grand scheme of things, because I was really able to focus on the investing side of the house. I bought my first investment property, a 62-unit apartment, while living in Japan.
62. Wow.
62 units. That was my very first investment property ever. Only my second property we'd ever bought. One was a primary residence before we moved to Japan, and then the 62 unit. And then just kind of kept going from there. I jumped into ADPI and started helping them with their multifamily program right around the same time. And it was, I don't know how far you want me to go, or if that was good. But
no, that's incredible. I mean, I have a lot of directions I could take that. And I just love, one of the key themes that happens a lot of times in these interviews with people who've achieved a lot of things was that first, nugget of wisdom of good ideas came from their significant other or their wife, and that sounds like it happened for you as well. So
very much so.
Did you feel like she was responsible for giving you that platform to build the financial knowledge that you have today?
Oh, she was very much responsible for it. I don't remember who it was. I wish I could give credit to who it was, whoever said this. But like the number one decision a person can make in their life is the person they marry, right? Because
Mhm.
almost everything you do from that point on is affected by that person, right? In good, bad, indifferent, doesn't matter. Everything you do from that point is affected by that person. In my case,
Yeah.
it's been pretty much nothing but positive. And she was the one who really got me on that train. Like the one thing we didn't talk about before we got married, is we probably should have, was finances. And I'm really glad we didn't, because she might not have married me. She might have been like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I
Right.
don't think we mix well together in that. But I do usually recommend people do that before they get married. But in our case, we didn't. And that was a massive change in my future, just by learning from her.
Yeah. Yeah. We get so lucky by the people when we married, by the people we marry. I feel the same way about my wife. It's just when you marry the right person that is just the right fit, who could teach you things and who you can learn from and who you're willing to be open to, it's like you just grow together over life, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
such a wonderful, wonderful thing. So it's neat to hear you talk about that. And kind of going back to when I was researching, I looked at RAL Capital, and I was trying to figure out what the acronym was for. And so I think it's your initials, right? Both
Yeah,
you and your wife, is that
yeah,
right?
Raquel and Adam
Okay,
La Barr, correct.
gotcha. That's what I figured. But yeah, I like that you can tie that into it and make that bond very strong that way.
Yeah,
I
one
and
thing I did not realize, though, when I first created that, is as a guy in real estate, I had not gone down this path. But there's residential assisted living, RAL,
Oh,
that now everybody seems to think that that's what I invest in, because it's RAL. But like, no, 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 that's just me and my wife. I don't really do that. So
right. Yeah, I made a similar mistake when I named the title of my book Shifting Gears. I didn't look at all of the other books that were titled that, and it's not good. I don't recommend anybody looks that up without my name as well. But
well, now
but
I'm curious.
don't do it, Adam. But I that yeah. So kind of going back to your parents were in the military.
Mhm.
So you were a military. Was it both your mom and dad in the military at the time, or just your dad, or how
So
did that look?
just my dad at the time. So my parents met while they were in the Air Force, and
Ah,
then when my mom got pregnant with my sister, she left the military, and it was just my dad staying in from there.
gotcha. Did they encourage you to kind of follow that path, or did they give you kind of a different route, or what did you feel?
Um, I I don't know if I ever felt like it was like, hey, you should totally do this, but it was more like I asked questions because that's what I was around.
Yeah.
So the more questions they answered, the more it made me want to go do it, and so I just went and did it. And I was, third generation Air Force, so it was just one of those like, oh, this is apparently what we do. I don't, it's just what we do. So.
Yeah, that's incredible. Is that something now that you have kids, are you looking to kind of push them in that direction? Or are you more open-minded to what they want to
Boy.
do, or what are your thoughts?
Um, I there's a bunch of different directions my brain goes with that. Like what I've been saying is I want them to know it's an option, but not the only option. Like if that's really what
Mhm.
they want to do, because that's what they have decided based on all the options in front of them. I just don't want it to go like what I did, where I didn't know there were other options. Even when I joined, like both of my parents were like, "You should be an officer. You should be an officer. You'd be a great officer." And then I went to the enlisted recruiter. Like both of them were in the military. Neither one of them even really knew how to tell me how to go be an officer. So it was just I just
Mhm.
went and became an enlisted guy because that's the direction I went. So, um, and without getting too political, there's been a lot of changes. One of the reasons I left as well. There's been a lot of changes in how the military has been treated and working, and the things that they're moving towards. That I wouldn't say that I'm going to encourage my kids to go in the
Mhm.
military. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'll stop there.
that's oh no, no, that's good info. I'm always very curious, as being from the civilian side, and getting just like an open door to what
Mm,
what life is like in the military, because there's part of me certainly that's inspired by it, like the service aspect of it, and then there's a part that's just really curious, just to know. And I think that curiosity exists in a lot of places. So I appreciate you sharing where what your experience was like in there.
yeah.
And yeah, does it still does that experience still kind of guide how you interact in the world? I guess, in other words, did it shape any of your values, or one good or bad? And did you find that it gave you kind of some platform to want to be in service in other ways?
Um, I want to go. I think I'm going to answer this in a couple different ways. One, because
Mhm.
I love the flow over fear side of the house, and I want. I don't know if I've shared any of this on a podcast before, but um, I've been to Iraq, been to Afghanistan. My job was to go find bombs. Right, I was a
Mhm.
dog handler. We'd go find bombs before they blow people up. Was our entire purpose in life. So um, I was an Air Force guy, but I deployed with the Army in Iraq and then with Army Special Forces in Afghanistan. What we would do is just to set the stage a little bit is we would helicopter insert into people's front yards, go blow their doors off the hinges, go in, find whatever bad guy we were looking for, whatever high value target HVT we were looking for, pull them out, search for whatever we needed, call the helicopter back to come pick us up, and we'd leave. So
Mhm.
there's a whole lot going on, right? Some of the missions were longer than that, some of them were just like that. Um, uh, but there was a lot of stuff that I've dealt with through all of that, that I was stuck in a fear based mindset, not because I was afraid of what was going on, but because there was always something that was going to happen. So you were always on edge, ready to go all the time. And
Mhm.
even in my enlisted career after that, I was in Korea for a year, and I was known as the guy that they would call and say, "Hey, at La Barr, go fix this problem," because I could be a hothead on the like. I was always. It's like in the Avengers when Hulk talks about how he's able to control it. He's like, I'm always angry. Like it was me. I was always angry. It could be turned on at any moment in time.
Yeah.
Um, and it kept me in a world that was not looking for ways to grow. It kept me in a world of this is just what I am. And I embraced that portion of me. And it was very difficult to work through. I mean, I had people trying to tell me that that was not the best way to live. And I was like, whatever, you don't know. And I would just
Mhm.
move on. Um, and there again, like that was a great thing of me getting out. I was able to kind of step away from that a little bit, and then getting married. It took me a while to go through some of that stuff and work through some of the stuff, but being able to talk about it, being able to learn from it, helped me kind of realize, okay, I can help a lot of other people in saying, hey, like just have a conversation with me. I've been through a lot of stuff, business, life, name it. Um, I can help deal with some of these things, even if it's just an ear to talk to. So I'd say that that was one thing that I learned a lot. Is a self reliance, right? Because like going through Afghanistan, I had some difficult times dealing with the group that I was attached to. Like we just didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things, especially my
Mhm.
team sergeant. Um, Lots of fun stories there, but it took me a long time to stand up for myself, and that's where I started to learn how to do that. But I did it in a negative way. So then it took a while later on, and now in business, I look at myself and go, okay, well, how would my old Adam would have responded to this versus where I should be in the direction I'm trying to go, especially like even being a dad, you know. Um,
Yeah.
so all in all, I'd say yeah, the military had a massive influence on everything that I am today. Whether good, bad, or indifferent, again, like I think they've done a lot to take the negative aspects of what I was going through to be able to positively impact now my business and my family.
And I love that you took that away from that. Like you took a experience that wasn't necessarily maybe 100% positive for you, but you took the right types of values and you were able to kind of fix that. If there was anybody that might be struggling with similar maybe questions or concerns that is in that situation, like maybe they're in service, maybe they're struggling with how they're connecting with where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what would you suggest as a first step? And I don't know if I'm treading on dangerous ground there or anything like that, because I don't want to put you on the spot with anything. But is there
No,
any kind of suggestions or recommendations you would have for people that might be in that spot?
I was actually just talking about this with my sisters this past weekend, but it was one of those. So there are 22 veterans a day on average that commit suicide, a day, and that's a lot, right?
Hmm.
So the thing for me that really made a big difference was being able to actually realize I just needed to say something. I didn't realize I needed to. I literally fell apart in my kitchen just talking to my wife out of nowhere. It literally was not thinking about it. I didn't think, but it was there in the back of my brain, things that I was working through, issues that I was having. And we're talking years later. Um,
Sure.
uh, and I had never worked through any of it. So I just broke down, started talking to my wife, and the next day, literally, I felt like the weight was off my shoulders. So I'd say if you're working through things, if you're having issues with stuff, I don't care whether like folks in business have same things. Like they've got a bunch of people on their shoulders. Like, hey, I'm paying all of these people. I'm the owner of this company. I'm the CEO of this company. I rely on this stuff. The economy is going really bad right now. Everything is on my shoulders. I feel like the end of the world is coming. I made a bad mistake and something happened in the company. There's all sorts of life stressors that come on all of us. And unless you have somebody to talk to about it, you're going to just internalize all of it like I did for a long time. So my first step would be just, everybody feels like they're going to be a burden to somebody when it gets to that point, but you're not. Just step out and talk to somebody about it. Like if you like, you could email me, call me, especially if you're a military person and that's, you feel like you can't. Like I will put hands down at any point in my time, pick up a phone, especially for a veteran who's on that edge. I was always in one of my other jobs in the military, I had to investigate all sorts of suicides.
Mm-hmm.
And I always looked at those in a very cynical light, right? Like everybody I talked to was like, hey, they're already dead. I can't bring them back. The only thing I ever saw was there's really nothing anybody could have done to change this. So that's the mentality I always had. And then there was one person, a friend of mine, that I ended up talking to that he stopped himself from committing suicide because of a conversation I had with him. And that was a light switch in my head that, wow, we can actually make change in people's life. Like I didn't know from the perspective I was in. So talk to somebody who has a different perspective, who's maybe been through what you have, or maybe they haven't been through what you have, because they're going to have a different perspective on life and a different perspective on where they can grow from there.
Do you find that you can connect? And thank you for sharing that, by the way, because I think that's powerful. It's something I've heard from a lot of veteran friends that I have is that, one of the biggest scourges on our society right now is that veteran suicide. There's a lot of it, and that kind of help for that kind of and resources for that is one of the most important things that we can have. And do you feel like it is something where, I mean, you mentioned that it doesn't have to be connected to the military. It could be somebody else or somebody. Do you feel like you can make those connections outside of the military, and so really just finding connection anywhere?
Yeah, are you saying the military person finding that, or me personally finding that connection?
Right, that the military person finding that connection anywhere, like with anything.
Yeah, I think the military person themselves is going to have a hard time if they're still just struggling through that themselves, because there's not very many. It took me a while to associate some of the problems that entrepreneurs have with that with what I've gone through, right? Because there's no way that I'm going to be able to look at as much as maybe Adam, maybe that you've been through. There's no way I'm going to look at you and say, "Oh yeah, well, when was the last time that you had to yank dead bodies out of a bomb?" Right? Like a bomb just exploded, and you're trying to pull things out. And so, why am I going to come talk to you? You've never been like. So I think that especially if they're going through something like that, a military member is going through something like that, I'd recommend that they go through and talk to somebody who's been through that themselves. Because that's a different world. But now, even though you would have a ton of tools for that person to work from, there's such a barrier there already that they just want to talk to somebody who's been through what they have been through. And, because there were people I've talked to like, you do not understand a thing that I'm saying. They may have been great assets. Like my pastor. I could have gone to my pastor and talked to my pastor. Have they gone through that? No, probably not. Right. But I could have gone and talked to my pastor and they would have had amazing tools for me to work with. But yeah, for the most part, I personally would probably recommend a military veteran going through those things to go and talk to another veteran who's been there.
Yeah. And I appreciate that perspective because it's so important that at least, especially when you're that vulnerable to connect with someone that maybe has a shared experience, has a perspective on that specific aspect of it. Yeah, totally. I think that's really, wise advice. And I appreciate you sharing that. And you touched on kind of the faith though, where when you talk to your pastor and things like that. Has that been something that's always been with you? Was it something that was developed over time? Is it something that's continuing to develop? What does that look like for you in your life?
Boy, I'd say it's probably developed 3 separate times in my life.
Yeah. Okay.
Growing up, I grew up in the church with my mom. My dad never went to church, still doesn't. We're still praying that he does, right? We still want that to happen. But then I went into the military and started doing everything that I was doing and just kind of, I think when you become an adult, especially if you grow up in the church and you become an adult, eventually you have to make the decision yourself, right? It's just like any other decision in life. Your decisions are made for you as you're growing up, and then when you become an adult, you kind of have to make that decision yourself. I had to remake the decision to go back to church and start doing it. And if I'm completely honest, one of the reasons that I really started to go consistently is because I was looking for a good wife, and I was like, this is going to be a great place to find a good wife for somebody that I'm looking for.
Yeah,
didn't happen that way, but that was one of the reasons I started going back, which I honestly don't care what reason gets you in the door as long as you're there, right? But at the same point, and church is a great place to find a wife, but make that not be the only reason you're going to church, right? But then I going through the same struggles and dealing with a lot of stuff. It was one of those, like I was driving down the road once and I just like got angry at my mom because she said something about God asking, like I forgot to fill up with gas before I got on the highway. And I was really angry because this was back when Angry Adam was around all the time. And, uh, she was like, that's all right. God will take care of us. I was like, God doesn't care about my gas tank. I just got angry. I was like, he doesn't care about my gas tank. He didn't care about XYZ happening in my life. He doesn't care about my gas tank. And then that was a new trigger in my life of like, why I need to work on some things. Like I need to figure some stuff out. So I ended up going back to church a little bit more, getting a lot more involved. I actually signed up for my master's in theology because I was really digging into. I found a pastor that I really liked to listen to that was like talking to men, and I was like, I need to be talked to like a man. Like you talk to me like I'm a man. Step on my toes. Tell me where I'm screwing up. Tell me what it means to be a biblical man. In the church, especially, we tend to have a lot of in society as a whole. Don't get me wrong, but in the church, like there's a bunch of 40-year-old boys, 40, 50-year-old boys. And it's like, no, like where are the strong Christian men that represent Christianity in a good, strong Christian light? You either have like this flowery version of Jesus, and that's what I'm representing is this amazing, or we have just not showing up because they're out doing man things or whatever. Like, no, I'm drinking beer, watching football, I'm not going to church. Right. So, but there's not much of the, you can be a man who drinks beer and watches football while also being a man that supports and loves his family and has faith. So I'd say it resurfaced again, especially when I had kids. Like that was a real, like getting married was one, like that moment there. And then having kids was really another eye-opening moment for me. And I think it's a constant growth thing. I think I'm always trying to grow. I think we all are, like I hope we all are. But I'd say I'm probably as strong as I've ever been now in my faith.
Yeah. And so you didn't meet your wife in church. Where did you meet your wife?
So we initially met in the military. We were both sent to an assignment, and we were assigned to very different places, got sent to a completely different place, and then went back to our other places. And she was trying to recruit me into the job I eventually did when I became an officer. And I was like, nah, dude, I'm out. Like, I'm done with this Air Force stuff. So good luck. But yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. And so she helped you to kind of see the light with regard to investing and in the right way. You bought your first property, which 62 unit, which blows my mind. That's, I mean, a lot of people starting out with like, a small, single unit, maybe a 2 unit, but 62 units, that's a big jump. What prompted that? Like just diving all in? Was that just, I'm going to go for it, or did it just fall in your lap? How did that look?
So I spent about 4 years researching, right? I tend to be a analysis by paralysis by analysis kind of guy, but I was researching, trying to learn as much as I could. And then what I did was I built what I wanted our future to look like. Keynote in this is I would recommend anybody, if you're going to build what your future looks like, make sure you ask your wife what the future looks like as well. Don't just build it yourself. Like do that with your wife, right? I did not do that the first 2 times I did this, but so I built what I wanted our financial future to look like, and then I worked backwards. Okay, how many houses am I going to need for this? And I'd already heard a couple of apartment podcasts and read some of that stuff, but my brain was just, all I can do is houses. That's just what I know. So then I did the analysis. Like, boy, that's a lot. And then the more I started to learn about economies of scale with apartments and how I could do all this stuff, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I joined a mastermind group with Jake and Gino, and jumped into that when they were first I think it was when they're first starting their mastermind. And I jumped into there. And I got around a group of like-minded people that were driving for the same thing, and answering questions, providing value inside the community, saying, "Hey, this is what's going on. This is my thoughts." And then somebody reached out to me and said, "Hey, we've got this apartment under contract. I think you'd be a great fit to be a partner." So I did the review, and I did, if I'm completely honest, did not do enough review. We can go into that if you'd like, but I did not do enough review. It was an interesting property, but it got my foot in the door. It got me kind of rolling into the apartment scene. So that's how I kind of got to that point. Was I kept analyzing, figured out that this is the best way to go for my numbers, and jumped in.
Now, when you talk about that community that you were leaning into, the real estate community, were they kind of the co-investors in this? Did they provide some capital for it, or was it all on you?
So this was so the guy who sent me a message had already had a few different partners. So it was a joint venture, a JV on the 62 units. So we brought in capital and some brain power and kind of went from there. I couldn't do obviously boots on the ground. I lived in Japan, but
that's true. Yeah.
But yeah, it was a joint venture on that.
Hey everyone, I interrupt this program to introduce you to a powerful tool that will help you gain clarity on your vision and accelerate your growth and achievement. If you're listening to this show, it is likely that you have an exciting vision for your life. But the problem is that we often get caught up in the day to day. We get distracted, we face uncertainty, overwhelm, and self doubt. And as a result, the gap between where you are and where you want to be seems insurmountable. And that's why I created a framework for how you can turn your vision into strategic, disciplined action that will accelerate your results in the next 90 days. I call it the Vision Reflection Retreat. It is a 2-day solo excursion designed to reignite passion and adventure into your busy life and realign your focus toward your why. This is the very same framework that I use every 90 days to reflect on my own life and my vision and set my goals for the next quarter. And it has been a game changer. And the good news is that I'm giving away this Vision Reflection Retreat guidebook for free when you sign up for my newsletter. Simply go to flowoverfear.com/retreat and download your free guide and enjoy the journey. That's awesome. And so you brought it up, how you made it, maybe didn't do enough research on it. So what went wrong on that deal?
How long is this podcast?
Well, now it's going to be a lot longer.
Yeah, everything. If I'm completely honest, almost everything went wrong.
So a lot of lessons.
Yeah, there was a lot of lessons. I tell people all the time. I said if it was, this is one of those deals that you either, especially if your first deal, you run as far away from real estate as you possibly can, or you say, if I can manage that, I can do any of this. And I had already bought a second apartment building while we were going through the issues with this one, so it's not like I could run away from it. I'm still in it, like I can't go anywhere. So so I just took the other route and said, what can I learn from this, and moved on. So I mean, we had everything from we had to remove a partner for some issues there. We had everybody. When I mean, so it was like a C class, maybe C minus property in like a B area with D class tenants, which is decent, right? A C class property in a B class area is great. I could add some money, add some work to it, and make it a B class property, raise the rents, and get it up and running. But it was 3 different buildings, and we said we're going to shut one building down at a time, let the other 2 buildings pay for our expenses. It was a bridge debt deal. Went through all of the stuff. The second we emptied out the first building, everybody saw the writing on the wall and stopped paying. So we had the sheriff. We had the sheriff literally door by door, like knocking on everybody's door, evicting them, because we couldn't get anybody to pay. We couldn't get anybody out. So we're like, well, let's just get everybody out, and then we can at least start working on everything all at once. So I mean, we had to bring in extra dumpsters, because you're talking, I mean, mattresses getting launched out, people throwing their microwaves out the windows into the parking lot. Like it was ugly. And it was a lot of extra work. So we were spending all of our rehab money, paying all of the expenses, paying all the bills, going through all this process. So we, like, the business plan went to crap. The contractor walked out on us halfway through and left a bunch of stuff not to code over an argument they were having with one of the partners about a different property. So it wasn't even the same property. They were just like, I'm done with all of you guys, and just left it all. A bunch of stuff not to code. So we had to get another bridge loan, which going bridge to bridge is very difficult to do. Lots of wonderful interviews there. But long story short, I didn't actually lose money. I thought I was going to. One of the conversations I had with my wife is, I said, one day I'm going to come up to you and I'm going to tell you, I'm sorry, honey, we just lost $30,000. And I want you to be prepared for that conversation now, because it's bound to happen in investing. It's going to happen. I was not expecting to have to walk up to her and say, I'm sorry, honey, we just lost a couple $100,000, which was getting close to that, right? We were getting very close to that. And the grand scheme of things, the market helped us out a ton. We were able to get it up and running. I got myself a lot more involved in what was actually happening. I stayed way too passive. I thought that I didn't have enough to add, so I just kept my mouth shut until I realized what was going on. And then I was like, no, like, we need to do X, Y, and Z. And I just jumped in. And I said, I'm not having that conversation with my wife. I'm going to have this conversation with you guys instead. So we ended up turning the property around enough to be able to sell it to somebody, to where I made, I think, over the 3 years we owned the property, 2 years, 3 years, something like that, like 2% on my money overall. So I did not lose money on that deal. And it was a massive blessing to not lose money on that one.
Nice. So you're over water, and you learned a lot of lessons. Now, given that experience and given what you've learned thus far and where you are today, is that something that you would have I mean, is there anything you would change about that experience? Would you have not done it, or would you have done it differently?
It's it's really hard to say, right? Because I have this conversation with various different things, like what happens if, what would have happened if I would have applied myself better in high school, because
Yeah.
I gave up on being good, because I knew where I was going. It didn't matter as long as I graduated, it didn't matter. But I am a moderately intelligent individual, so I could have done really well in college and gone through. So what would have happened? Well, then I wanted to marry my wife, and then I wanted to have gone to where I'm good. So I don't
Right.
want to change any of that stuff. However, if I'm talking to somebody else, I would advise that they change a lot of what I did. Right? Don't
Yeah.
do a lot better research on your partners. Make sure you know who you're getting in bed with. Know what skills you bring to the table, and that is going to take a little bit of self analysis and probably even talking to somebody else. I didn't know what skills I brought to the table at all. I just thought I'm just some dumb military kid that, what do I know? This is my first investment property. I need to keep my mouth shut. Um, but know what values you bring, and by having good conversations with other people, interview your partners. Make sure you guys have the same long-term vision on where you want to go with things. Make sure you guys are aligned emotionally. You're aligned strategically. You're aligned financially. You're aligned across the board. This is a marriage, right? Make sure that
Yeah.
have those interview questions set up. Um, and then, stay on top of contractors a lot better. So there's a lot I would have changed, and I would advise people to do differently. But I'm glad that I went through the experience. So
Yeah, and I appreciate you going down that direction, because I like to ask it, because if there's anybody listening out there, a lot of us are just afraid to start. And your
yeah,
story is so impressive, because it was just like, I'm going all in on this 62 unit, kind of big property kind of thing, like, and a lot went wrong with that. But here you are today, teaching people how to invest for
yeah,
the first time, having your own capital group with your wife, that expresses your values, starting a podcast, doing all of these amazing things that supports your family towards this ideal of financial freedom, which allows you to do the things you want to do. And I mean, it just goes to the point of, just if even if you have that fear at the beginning, just start. It doesn't
yeah,
have to be a 62 unit property, but just start. If things go wrong, they do, but it's not the end of the world. You can still move forward. So
yeah.
I love that perspective that you share there. So, and then, so now, kind of talk. Can you talk a little bit about how you got into the active duty passive income thing? Because that's, it's adding a lot of value to the world, and it's also, building people up to be able to find that financial freedom
Mhm.
themselves. Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I met a guy named Eric Upchurch. He's a co-founder, another co-owner of ADPI. I met him at a multifamily conference, and they were like, "Hey, we're trying to learn more about this multifamily stuff." I was already dabbling in it a little bit, and I don't remember if I had already had my 62 units or not yet, but it was sometime around the same time as that property, and I was like, I was just trying to meet other people who were like-minded.
Yeah.
So I went to a conference. It was a Rod Khleif conference, and we met. And he was like, "Yeah, we've got this company, Active Duty Passive Income." They were very new at the time. I think we had like 1,000 people in our Facebook group, if that, when I first joined. I think it was right around 1,000. And they were like, "Hey, we're thinking about doing some multifamily stuff." And I said, "Well, I've done a bunch of education on it. I'm working on it. Again, I don't remember if I had the property or not. But we just communicated, talked, went out to lunch. We ate Subway. It was probably the best Subway sandwich you'd ever had, considering where it brought us. But we I went back to Japan, and I told my wife, I said, "Hey, this is what's going on." And they brought me in as a. I told them, I said, "Well, I'd be happy to share my journey as I'm going through and teach anybody who's willing to learn from me." And I don't know what that looks like, but before you know it, I'm turn into a co-owner and start creating a academy with another guy that we brought on later, Tim Kelly. So we brought him on shortly after me, and he and I created the Multifamily Academy and started pushing this out to a bunch of people. So that's kind of where that started, was going to a conference, shaking somebody's hand, and having a Subway sandwich.
I love that. That's awesome. And so, obviously, you're looking at military people, veterans, and
Hmm.
to try and help out. Is there a specific avatar in that group that you're looking to promote to, or who's your ideal? Who's the ideal person that you want to come up to you and say, Adam, show me the way?
Yeah. So, business plan wise, when you look at it, what our avatar kind of is that that 22 to 45-year-old military member, veteran, or their family. Like, it could be a spouse, because a lot of the spouses are the ones that are actually doing the investing, because their husbands or wives are out doing the military thing, right? So the spouse ends
Mhm.
up managing the money and doing all of that. So really, that's kind of the range we're looking at. Anybody in that range, we've got. we just got done with our second annual conference about a month before we're recording this, and it was awesome. We had such a wide range of people there, that spouses, actual active duty members, veterans, folks who were retired like 20 years ago, all sorts of stuff. We had like 230 people or something like that there, and it was a lot of fun to see all of these people show up from all of these different walks of life. But the one thing they all have in common is they're associated with the military. So
Hmm.
really, that's all you need to do is be associated with the military, military member, veteran, or spouse, family member that is wanting to change their life and grow their passive income and grow their real estate.
Yeah. Well, one of the directions I love that this conversation is taking is, we kind of started down the path of talking a little bit about that healing journey for
Mm-hmm.
veterans in particular, like, that idea that, that there's specific challenges and struggles that veterans go through in their career. And then we're talking about this personal development journey of trying to find that
Yeah.
financial freedom. That's two levels of like healing and personal development. And in both of those, I'm seeing the common theme is community. Like you,
Yeah.
you just have to have a community for that.
Yeah.
How powerful have you seen that there's any overlap in that, like that within this community of ADPI, active duty passive income, that there is a healing aspect too as well to it, or does it kind of transcend that a bit? How does that how are you seeing that in that organization?
So I'd say yes in general, and I'll walk down that path. Is one of the things that we tend to see on why veterans commit suicide is, especially after they get out of the military, you've always been told what your mission is. You always have something to drive towards. You always know what the next thing is.
Hmm.
Even if you don't know what the next thing is, you know what the next thing is. Like you don't know where you're going to go, but you know you're going to go somewhere, and you know you're going to use the tools that the military has given you to go take care of some things.
Yeah.
And then you get out, and you're like, all right, well, what's my mission now? What's my focus now? So we tend to see a lot of people go from putting on a uniform on Friday, taking it off Friday after they get out of work and retire, to put on a suit on Monday morning and go do a similar job as a GS employee, as a government employee. Um,
Hmm.
where now we're looking at real estate, saying, hey, this is a new way for you to serve. This is a new mission, a new thing for you to go after around the same kind of people that you've been going after missions for with before. So if we
Hmm.
can get you around that same community with a new target in mind, yes, you still have to deal with some of the stuff we talked about before, but at least now you have something you're grasping towards. You have something, instead of running away from something, you're running towards something, which is a much stronger drive to run towards something than to run away from something. Um, so if we can get people around those same like-minded people, then yeah, I think it makes a huge difference. And as an example of the healing portion of it, is I want people to do this more often. Is I was standing in the back of the conference, and there was a guy that was there, and he and I were chatting. He'd gone through a lot of stuff in Iraq, lost some of his guys, and dealing with some PTSD issues. And he and I were just chatting, and it was one of those that, the first time I got out of the military, I was like, I'm not going to go get any VA disability because I know this person who's gone, and I know that person who's missing this, and I'm nowhere near them.
Hmm.
And the way he kind of talked to me about it, he's like, look, man, like every single person has gone through something, and every single person is doing the same thing you're doing. I forgot the term that he used, but it's basically like minimizing myself because of what other people have gone through.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and he's like, that person that you just said is walking down the road missing a leg because of what they went through as to why you're not doing it, is saying the same thing about the person they were next to that died. So,
Hmm.
like, it doesn't mean you don't need help. It doesn't mean you don't deserve something. It doesn't mean you don't go after what you're going for. And when we just kind of work through those things together, and again, that all came down to just because the two of us were willing to talk about it. We'd already worked through a lot of our stuff, so we opened our mouth, and like he helped me even just understand things a little bit differently by doing that. So because you're around like-minded people, those types of conversations can be fostered, and you can have those moments, to be able to grow in yourself to then become a better investor afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And I can relate a lot to that idea of I don't know I don't remember what the term is either, but like that trauma comparison kind of thing, like
Mm-hmm.
that thing. And that, I even see that in, my kids a lot of times now that we have it, it's, their experiences are challenging for them that
Mm-hmm.
and other people might not. And, in a, previous world, I may have looked at that and said like, that's not that bad. You don't have it as bad as we used to have it or whatever,
Yeah.
or that kind of thing. But I realized that, yeah, everybody's experiencing their own trauma, and whatever it is to them, or their own challenges or struggles, whatever it is to them, it may be just enormous to them, and it doesn't matter really regarding what's in their head versus what's in somebody else's head. I mean, those kinds of things, are unique to every individual. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I know there's a lot of guilt. When I was feeling a lot of fear and anxiety in my own life, and even in the depths of alcoholism, there was a lot of like, well, I shouldn't be complaining. I've got it good, that kind of thing. I
Hmm.
usually am, but there is that whole thing that everybody has something. So just don't be afraid to reach out to those communities and get that help. And so you have kids, you have family, and they're obviously very important to you. You have a podcast called the BizDad Podcast, which implies that you have kind of both, that you want to express on both. You have a passion for both. What are some of the lessons you've taken away, or the biggest lessons you've taken away from starting that podcast, the BizDad Podcast? Have you learned a lot, or have you? What are some of the bigger lessons that you've learned from that?
No, I've learned pretty much nothing, especially having people like Adam Hill on.
I
It
agree.
hasn't
Yeah,
really
I've.
helped me. Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I honestly
Thanks for
have
joining
learned
us. No.
yeah, it's been a pleasure. This one will never get aired. But but no, it's been a wonderful experience. I still don't have much of a mission behind it other than to talk to other dads who operate businesses, so that the way I started it, the reason I started it was so that I could steal everybody's good ideas, and if somebody else
Mhm.
manages to get something out of it as well, great. If not, at least I did. At least I'm stealing it. And if you start a podcast, people are more likely to have a 2 hour long conversation with you, rather than just let me get 2 hours on your calendar to chat, right? So
Right.
and I'm saying that in a semi tongue in cheek. That's not obviously fully why I did it. I mean, I love being a dad. It has changed my life immensely. It is I've been wanting to be a dad since I was like 13, and it took me like an extra 20 years to finally become a dad. But I am absolutely thrilled with being a dad. And I'd say that the conversations have been very eye opening in a lot of different ways. And I'm still kind of shifting where I want the podcast to go. We've got almost a year's worth of content created, but only 5 months of it released. So I've got a lot of like, who knows where it's going to turn for now. But um, I've learned more about how I can include my kids in the business. I've learned like how I can emotionally relate to my kids a little bit better. How I can show up better. And sometimes that means putting this stupid thing, this phone, away, right? And having good timer set on it, having good things built into it, understanding what my kids need. You even mentioned earlier, uh, understanding what, like, your kid may be going through something. You're like, well, that's not as bad as what I used to have, right? And there's somebody I was listening to. I don't remember if it was on my podcast or if I was prepping for the podcast or whatever it was, but they were talking about whatever your child is going through, right? Yes, as a 40-something-year-old, that what they're going through is no big deal. But as a 4-year-old, that is the biggest deal a 4-year-old is going through right now. So you need to relate and tell them, man, I really understand what you're going through. I can feel the pain that you're going through. Like, understand, like, and get down on their level and have a good conversation with them, and just learn how to show up to be a better dad. And in turn, it helps me show up to be a better business owner as well, because if I've got that part of my life taken care of, it helps a lot more on this side to be able to manage these things and be able to talk to employees if I'm not so concerned about what's going on with the kids. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I think I did.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that's one of the values of a podcast. I mean, selfishly, yeah, you get to like have an hour long
Yeah.
coaching session where you're
Yeah.
just kind of learning from somebody, and I love that idea because it's just following your natural curiosity, and that's why I was curious about it, because I've learned a lot doing this podcast from a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, and it's probably just one of the better ways to just get a more worldly perspective from a number of different people on how to do things, and so the subject matter that you talk about, which I love, and you interview people on, business and fatherhood, are so important because they're probably two of the most you know uh, involved things that we as men who are parents are involved with on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis. They're the two things that we need to be engaged with, and I'm curious as to, especially being involved in so many different things: RAL Capital, BizDad Podcast, ADPI. How do you balance that that fatherhood aspect of being really present and engaged with your kids and doing the business piece? What strategies have you implemented that have worked for you?
Um, so I hate the word balance because it's nearly impossible, right? Because every time you remove one thing off of the one balance, the other side flops up real quick, and
Sure.
and so there is a lot of back and forth that goes on there as I'm trying to figure it all out. And I was interviewing somebody recently on the podcast. I don't remember again who it was. I wish I could give the credit, but he was basically saying, look, like, you are you're realizing at a point in your life right now, because like right now I've got glass doors to my office,
Hmm.
right? So I can look out into my house. We started homeschooling this year, so add that to the ridiculousness going on in my house. So I've got all of my kids home. So I've got 3 kids. I've got them all home, running around the house. I do homeschooling. Me personally, I do the homeschooling in the morning before I start my business stuff,
Oh,
and
wow.
then I come in and start getting to work. And then the kids walk by, and they come in and say hi. If you ever watch my podcast, you will. I can almost guarantee see my kids show up on the podcast, at least one of them. So he was telling me, he was like, look, you're realizing that you're sacrificing some stuff on the business side because I'm not as efficient as I know I could be on the business side. But
Hmm.
it's because I want to be the father that's here right now. Like I may need to make some adjustments later as I'm pivoting some of this stuff. But this is still semi new to me working from home, doing all of this. It's been like a year and a half of straight dedicated work from home. Like here I am, a year and a half to 2 years, somewhere around there. Um, uh, so I'm probably going to have to make some adjustments to it. But right now, I know that this is what I want to do. Is I want to be around my kids as much as possible. I was in the military. I bounced around the world, all over the place. Um, uh, I, my son came running up to me one day when I was taking the trash out, and I've told the story probably 100 times. But he came running up to me one day when I was taking the trash out. I was traveling constantly, so much so that my going away gift says, Adam La Barr, thanks for visiting." Like because I was never there, so they were just like, thanks for visiting the base that you were technically assigned at. So I'm taking the trash out, and he comes running out to me, "Daddy, daddy, daddy, don't leave again." And he
Hmm.
was crying, and I was like, "Golly, something has to change." That's when I only had 1 kid. Now I've got 3 kids, and it's like, okay, well, how do I manage going from 1 kid to 3 kids and doing all of this? You know what? I just want to love on my kids as much as I can right now and be present. My wife is still in the Air Force, so she's still gone a lot. So it's like I'm going to do everything I can to support them in any way I can. I told my partners over it because I took over as the COO of ADPI, and I told my business partners, "Look, I'm starting homeschool this year, and I know that that's going to be a sacrifice for all of us. But I need to do what's best for my family. So right now in this season, that's what's best for my family. As
Hmm.
the seasons change, I may have to adjust and say, you know what, I'm happy I did that. Maybe my wife retires and she does the school. Maybe whatever it is. I just know that running the business gives me the flexibility to be able to be a dad a lot more present than I ever used to be. So how do I balance it? I'm not really sure. I just know that there's times that I need to sacrifice one over the other. There's times my wife knows that I need to. I'm able to communicate that. I'm able to be open and honest. Say, hey, this is going to be a time where I'm on literally an 8-hour EOS call for the entire day. I'm not going to be around to be able to help with things. Okay, no problem. Um, so I think the communication and understanding of this is just part of the seasons of where this is going to go, and we'll make the adjustments as we can.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned seasons there. I think that's such a great way of framing it. And I heard from one of our fellow GoBundance brothers on this podcast, Aaron Velke. He'd mentioned that he didn't like the word balance either. He said he liked the word
Yeah.
harmony, and I kind of like that a lot
Mm.
better too, because you're just like you're trying to find this harmony of all the things that are your priorities in your life.
Yeah.
And I asked these questions. I really am curious about it because I listed out the priorities that I have for the next few years, and certainly just being a more present and engaged father is one of those things. As my
Mm-hmm.
kids, my son's turning 13, my daughter's turning 16. I only have, only a few more years left with these kids. I
Yeah.
feel like before they're leaving the door and out on their own. So so the time is short, and I appreciate that people like you are putting a message out there for fathers to to continue to wrestle with the idea of how they can be more engaged, how they could be more present, and focus on the business in the right way that really serves the family. You have an amazing set of values. I love that you've got the values of family and Christianity and growth with regard to your capital company, because that's just not a thing a lot of people do. And it's just great to see the success that you're seeing with those kinds of values in place. So I'm really grateful for that, and I'm excited. I'm a big fan of the BizDad podcast. I hope you keep it going because they're real conversations. They're authentic, and I love the kind of shows where you follow your curiosity, and that's definitely what you're doing, Adam. So I appreciate that.
So thank you. Appreciate it.
Where can people find the BizDad podcast? On Apple, YouTube, all
All
those
of the
good
above.
places?
Yep, they can
All
find them
right.
all those places. Like I tell people all the time, I don't even care if you listen to it; just let it play in the background, like build those numbers up, right? So, but no, I really
Yeah.
think you should listen to it. Yeah. Especially
Yeah.
that Adam Hill one; that was solid. It was really
That was, yeah, I appreciate the redemption.
good.
No. Awesome, Adam. Well, where else can people find you? If how would you like people to get a hold of you if they want to
Yeah.
reach
So,
out?
you could go to adam@activedutypassiveincome.com, especially if you're a military veteran. If you're not and you just want to chat with me, adam@RALCapitalGroup.com. That just kind of helps me filter who's coming into my inbox. Feel free to reach out to me there. You can go to our website, activedutypassiveincome.com. You can go to ralcapitalgroup.com and take a look at who we are there. But yeah, you can find me on all the social medias. It may not actually be me who responds. My assistant does a lot of that. I'll say that up front so you don't feel surprised if something happens. I may not actually be the one to respond, but I do what I can to be the first one to get to it.
Awesome. Well, if you missed any of that, it's going to be in the show notes. So to look for that, reach out to Adam on via email and on the socials, and check out the BizDad podcast. It's really, really great. Not just my episode, but everybody, all the episodes. It's all just really amazing people trying to become better fathers and business people. So you can learn a lot from it. Check that out. Give it a subscribe to it. Give it a nice big rating, 5-star rating. And Adam, dude, this has been awesome, man. I appreciate you being here. Thanks for sharing your story and your knowledge and your wisdom. I appreciate it, brother, and I look forward to catching up with you soon.
Thanks so much, Adam. Greatly appreciate it. Very humbling. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And to everyone else out there, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me today on Flow Over Fear. If you are liking this show, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. That way you'll be first to know when I drop a new episode, including interviews or trainings or dad jokes. That's right, dad jokes. Add a little levity to your life. And if you liked this episode in particular and you think somebody can get something from it, please share it with a friend. And that way we'll spread the message together. Thanks again for joining me today. We'll see you next time.